people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. En route to her big upcoming unification match with Jessica McCaskill, newly crowned WBO champion Sandy Ryan posted, "I am so locked in for this fight. I've learned much from my last fights, what to do and what not to do. I don't see or do anything with outsiders or just anything in general that doesn't have anything to do with my camp."
People that get it, get it.
Even though the fight has not yet been officially announced, Sandy Ryan is tabbed to be facing Jessica McCaskill in a welterweight unification bout sometime in the fall.
Supposed to be going down here in America. I heard something about the fight happening here stateside. We'll see if that checks out.
Sandy Ryan, the boxer puncher versus Jessica McCaskill, the more experienced and durable pressure fighter. In truth, Sandy's had the right fights to prepare her for this fight.
Sporting a professional record of 6 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 2 knockouts.
The 2 fights that she had with Erica Farias, a common opponent between her and Jessica McCaskill. The more recent fight that she had with Marie-Pierre Huel, a pressure fighter like Jessica McCaskill is a pressure fighter. That is adequate preparation for what she will be facing in Jessica.
She doesn't have as much experience as Jessica, not as many rounds in the bank, half the fights, less than half the fights.
But she's had some of the right ones. The experiences she had with Erica Farias, the experience she amassed opposite the ring Canada's Marie-Pierre Huel, those are similar opponents that pose similar challenges to what she will face in Jessica McCaskill, a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, a relentless pressure fighter, a durable pressure fighter that sports a professional record of 12 wins with 3 losses, no draws, and 5 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 15 professional bouts.
9 years older than Sandy Ryan.
It's going to be a tough fight. It's going to be a tough fight for the both of them, irrespective of who wins. What does Sandy Ryan have to do to beat Jessica McCaskill, and what's Jessica got to do to beat Sandy? Well, for Jessica,
She is at a stylistic disadvantage.
Jessica being a pressure fighter, Sandy Ryan being a boxer-puncher. You know, what makes a boxer-puncher dangerous for a pressure fighter is the boxer-puncher can alternate seamlessly from offense to defense, back to offense.
Using the pressure fighter's aggression against them. Jessica is an aggressive customer. So what chance does Jessica stand to win this fight?
Jessica, who was last in action in November of last year opposite the ring, a more experienced boxer-puncher than Sandy, and Chantel Kimran.
We see how that fight went.
What can she do to win this one? Well, Sandy Ryan is not yet as put together as Chantel Cameron was. In spite of the both of them being boxer-punchers, Sandy Ryan is not yet a finished product like Chantel is. Jessica has to use that against her, that Sandy is a lot less experienced than she is.
Hit her with so much, so fast, so hard that she can't think. Give her more than she's used to working with.
Dealing with. Jessica McCaskill being a pressure fighter, there's not much chance of her winning a boxing match, a chess match, a finesse fight. She's got to stick to what she knows and stick to what she does best because that's her best bet.
Put the squeeze on Sandy.
I noticed that Jessica McCaskill is some inches shorter than Sandy Ryan, the more compact fighter, sturdier, stumpier fighter. She's got to use that to her advantage and make herself a small target while coming forward. Rolling, riding, and slipping punches on the way in, bringing in overhand rights.
Bending at the waist, bending at the knees, fighting at a slight crouch.
She does this right. She can force Sandy Ryan to give up some of that height, give up some of that length to land punches.
Try to.
Sandy's likely going to try to box, try to keep it long and loose and on the outside. Jessica can counter those straight punches from the outside by getting under them, bringing over big hooks.
Overhand rights, gut-busting body shots to take Sandy's legs away. She's got to go to the body. She's got to try to.
In order to take Sandy Ryan's legs away, because I've got no doubts Sandy's going to be fleet of foot for this fight. She's going to be mobile. She's not going to stand in one spot. The focus for Jessica has to be making herself a small target using her lower center of gravity to bring Sandy down to her level.
Try to.
Jessica ain't got no choice. She has to close the distance on Sandy because Sandy's taller and longer. It's all about how she does it. She's got to make herself a small target. That's what Jessica's got to do. What Sandy's got to do is keep her cool.
Poise counts. Poise, under pressure, goes a long way.
It's easy to say that Sandy Ryan has to beat those feet and box from the outside, use those long levers to keep Jessica at arm's length, but that really is easier said than done.
Just ask Alma Ibarra. She had a height advantage over Jessica McCaskill, a reach advantage, but she couldn't keep her out.
Why?
She was flustered. She cracked under pressure. That's why.
It's knowing that Jessica McCaskill is going to bring the fight to you, so you have to pick her off. You have to time her entry and not be flustered by her aggression.
Use it to your advantage. At least you don't have to find her. You don't have to go looking for her. She'll come looking for you.
Money punch for Jessica McCaskill in this fight has to be the overhand right, the looping right. I'd say for Sandy, the money punch has to be the uppercut.
For Jessica, the overhand right is the perfect punch to counter Sandy's straight punches from the outside. For Sandy, the uppercut is the perfect punch to catch Jessica with on the way in.
Because Sandy's taller than Jessica McCaskill, she can really drive her hips into that punch, really turn into it and do a lot of damage with a single shot.
This is going to be a war. I have no doubts about that. This is going to be an action fight.
We'll talk more about the fight as the fight date approaches. Okay, we'll start with this. Just days out from the big welterweight showdown, the undisputed title fight between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, a former opponent of Terence Crawford's, Victor Pistol, says that Crawford will stop Spence after 6 rounds. In second half of fight, the speed will be the difference. I think Terence Crawford will win easily, Pistol said through a translator. He will stop Spence after 6 rounds. In the second part of the fight, speed will be the difference. There is nothing that Spence can do to Crawford that he hasn't seen before. Even if Spence gives him some trouble in the early rounds, Crawford will adjust and will do better, and I believe he will stop him. He has special insights into facing Terence Crawford because he fought him years ago in their unification match for what was the WBC and WBO titles.
Some might feel that because Victor has shared the ring with Terence Crawford before, and while his insights might be sound, his insights might be a bit partial, talking up the man that beat him, that gave him his first professional loss. Perhaps he might be a bit biased.
Some people might feel that way hearing Victor Pistol say these things in reference to Terence Crawford, and even if that is his honest opinion, his honest take on the fight, he doesn't have those same insights when it comes to Errol.
Perhaps for what are a less biased, less partial set of insights, we turn to yet another Ukrainian, 2-division champion, Oleksandr Usyk.
Former undisputed cruiserweight, current reigning Ring Magazine unified heavyweight champion Oleksandr Usyk predicts that Terence Crawford will beat Errol Spence.
You can't claim that Usyk is partial.
Even if you feel that Victor Pistol might be, Usyk's got no horse in the race, and Usyk says it's a great fight. I like Terence. He's a great boxer. I think Terence wins. That's my opinion. Usyk told Fight Hype.
You will notice a trend amongst cerebral boxers, the boxer's boxer, that most of those guys are picking Terence. You're talking about Victor Pistol, you're talking about Usyk, fighters that are not artillery fighters, and fighters that don't win fights through strength of arms.
They win their fights through strength of strategy. They're cerebral fighters, finesse fighters. Many of those fighters, that caliber of fighter, seems to be going with Terence Crawford to win the match on the strength of his boxing, his counterpunching, his movement, his ring IQ and ring savvy.
Looks that way.
Crawford and Usyk both historically have had the propensity for switching stances in the middle of fights. The Ukrainian also commented on Crawford's fighting style. There are some similar things when Terence switches his stance, but it's normal. All fighters from all over the world watch each other's fights and absorb some positive things, said Usyk. Then, when you watch someone doing something extraordinary for you, you try it in training, and if you succeed, you feel like, wow, that's great. I can use it in my fights as well.
Switch hitting, switching from orthodox back to southpaw, back to orthodox, seems to be all the rage in the sport now. Kind of like how Floyd Mayweather popularized the Philly shell years ago.
Years later, a good deal of fighters, a good number of them, decided to employ that guard on the strength of Floyd's success with the Philly shell. We see that now when it comes to switch hitting.
There are a good number of fighters that are employing switch hitting.
Good number of fighters now. I don't think many of of them are switch hitting at the same level that Terence Crawford is, being as accurate, as efficient, as
effective.
But it does seem like the last couple of years, Terrence's success being a switch hitter has helped to popularize that strategy. Yet another cerebral fighter that is favoring Terence Crawford to win is WBA light heavyweight champion Dimitri Bivol, who says, I would say Crawford is the favorite because of his speed, movement, and reflexes. Spence is the bigger guy in the ring and also has great ring IQ, but in my opinion, Crawford is the most complete fighter of all right now.
Yet another cerebral fighter with no horse in the race, impartial.
It's yet another cerebral fighter that is favoring Terence Crawford to win the match, win the fight. That's not saying that there aren't pros out there favoring Errol Spence Jr. to win the fight. He's got his people that are urging him on and rooting him on, though most of them...
I feel like most of those guys are just towing the company line, because who are we talking about? Other PBC fighters?
Who are we talking about? Javante Davis, his old drinking buddy? Who are we talking about? Jermel Charlo?
Who are we really talking about? Guys that are going to toe the company line for the PBC?
There are a lot of predictions floating around out there right now. Some are more useful than others, some more impartial. I turn to Alexander Usyk, I turn to Dimitri Bivol as two fighters, two champions, two elite-level guys that have no horse in the race.
No official ties, no formal ties to either Terence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr., and no axe to grind with either Terence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. Nothing that might hinder their judgment
or impede their ability to call it down the middle, impede their ability to be impartial. I notice that a good number of cerebral fighters, they seem to favor Terence Crawford to win the match.
Most I could come up with for Spence as far as an impartial observer, somebody edging Spence to win that doesn't really have a horse in the race, is veteran trainer Bob Santos.
Giving the edge to Spence behind his power and size. That will be the difference, at least according to Bob. While he understands why Crawford is listed as a slight favorite, he believes that Spence will be too much for the Omaha native who has captured titles in 3 weight classes. Listen, Crawford is a heck of a fighter. Moving back and forth from orthodox to southpaw has produced fantastic results for him, Santos told BoxingScene.com. I just feel like in the end, Spence's advantage in size and power will be too much for Crawford. It really is close to a 50-50 fight, but Spence has fought the better competition in the division, and that could be another key factor.
I noticed that whenever somebody's picking Spence to win the fight, they never tell you what does he do better than Terence Crawford in terms of nuts and bolts, in terms of strategy and boxing.
I notice all I ever tell you is that he's bigger and stronger than Crawford, that he's gonna overwhelm him, but they never tell you what exactly he does better than Terence.
Is he more defensible than Terence? Does he have a better jab, better footwork?
Is he more balanced? Is he a better counterpuncher? In what areas does Errol Spence excel that Terence Crawford does not? Bob Santos continued, Spence has been through a lot, but he always rises to the occasion. I could see a scenario play out where Crawford outboxes him.
Wait, I thought he was picking Spence to win.
But I still think Spence will be too big, too strong, and too physical for him. We do have to be careful not to downplay the role of physicality and being physical, being rough and tumble. That does have its role to play.
Sometimes that's just what the doctor ordered. But Spence's biggest advantage seems to be that he's bigger than Terence.
At least according to Bob Santos, at least according to some people, the biggest advantage that Spence brings into this fight is that he's a bigger guy and a stronger guy, at least according to some people, that he's a bigger guy than Terence. I don't look at that as an advantage, not this time. I look at it as a disadvantage.
Why?
I'll tell you why. Because according to Errol, he's outgrown welterweight. According to Errol, in a potential rematch with Terence, I would want it at 154. I've outgrown 147.
For any of you out there that might have heard me harping on about this the last couple of weeks, months, years, how many times have you heard me say that Errol might outgrow the division?
Errol, who says I would want it at 154, I've outgrown 147.
You often hear people say that Errol is bigger than Terence and perhaps stronger than Terence. In this situation, his size might be a disadvantage, as it makes it harder for him to get 147 than Terrence.
Been kind of hard, Spence says, but I've got a nutritionist and a dietitian to make sure I'm eating the right foods and make sure I'm good. But it's definitely hard. It's definitely a struggle. It's always hard, but yeah, this is the last time, definitely. I'm a lot older. I'm not as young as I used to be. So, you can't be putting your body through that much to fight.
See a lot of guys cutting a lot of weight these days on the premise that when they rehydrate the night of the fight, they'll be bigger and stronger, weighing more than their opponent.
It's the kind of thing that works up until it doesn't. It's the kind of thing that was working for Jarrett Hurd up there at 154 until one fateful day, all of his punch resistance was gone. At the hands of a non-puncher in Julian Williams, he was annihilated. He got floored.
It's because in boiling down to that weight, he ended up leaving too much of himself in the gym.
Could happen to Errol, who's admitting he's outgrown welterweight. Now, Terrence Crawford says counter-punching ability, ring generalship, and a mental approach is what separates him from Errol Spence.
Many times have you heard me say Errol is like a Gatling gun, whereas Terrence is more of a sniper, more likely to hit you with something you don't see.
It's particularly important when you're talking about a fight where one of the fighter's punch resistance might be waning due to him outgrowing the weight. I think everything is a key point in the fight. You've got my jab, you've got my movement, you've got my counter-punching ability, my brain and the way I think all around. Crawford told BoxingScene.com and other reporters. What separates me from him is my mentality, the way I think, my ring generalship, my counter ability.
Errol Spence Jr. is a more prolific puncher than Terrence Crawford. He opens up more, but what that means essentially is that he's open. He's open more often than Terrence.
Tack on that he's been struggling to make the weight. Struggling to make the weight directly affects a fighter's punch resistance, his ability to take a shot, a hard shot, let alone a shot that he might not see coming. Those are the ones that knock you out.
Those are the ones.
Our styles match up really well. You have one fighter that loves to come forward and be an action-packed fighter, and you have one fighter who loves to move, counter, and stand in there toe-to-toe. So it makes for a great fight. I'm training for everything, so I don't get caught up with anything that's unexpected, so we don't have any surprises.
Errol Spence Jr.'s activity, his work rate, might actually win him the early rounds because he is a busier fighter than Terrence.
By now it's established that Errol Spence Jr. likes to take it to his opponents. He's got a mean streak, and he throws punches in bunches. That's what'll get him countered.
In truth, they both have a mean streak, Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr., but Errol has a propensity for stepping into his jab and taking it to his opponent's mid-range to inside, whereas Terrence is on his toes, more fleet of foot, walking his opponents into punches.
Which enables him to use Errol's aggression against him. We've seen it in the past at 140 pounds. We've seen it in the past at 147. Aggressive come-forward fighters like Felix Diaz, Mean Machine, Igis Kavaliauskas, and Sean Porter.
If you give chase, Crawford's gonna set a trap and he's gonna set you up.
This puts the cherry on top of my career. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time, and I can't wait to get it on, said Terrence Crawford. The welterweight division has had a lot of great fights in the past, and this will be another one. There's a bright future for the division as well, with a lot of great talent coming up. It's still a hotbed for the sport.
I think this Saturday he's gonna put Errol Spence Jr. to bed. I think this is the one time where Errol's aggression, it won't avail him. It'll get him countered.
Doesn't get said enough that even though Errol Spence Jr. is perhaps the beefier fighter of the two, Terrence Crawford has more reach, more wingspan than Errol.
Which might explain why he's able to catch guys so often with punches they don't see. They think they're outside of his range, outside of his striking distance.
You guys already know how I've got it. You know who I'm going with.